British TV presenter Anne Robinson has confirmed she is in a relationship with the Queen's ex-husband.
Andrew Parker Bowles just broke 60 years of royal silence. At 86, the man who quietly stepped aside for King Charles has finally revealed the real reason he walked away from Camilla. It wasn't a standard divorce, and it wasn't just about infidelity. He was handed a calculated ultimatum from the very top of the British monarchy. What he saw behind palace doors changed the line of succession forever. A 60-year secret breaks the silence. The rain was heavy over Wiltshire in early spring. Andrew Parker Bowles sat at a corner table in a quiet country pub, miles away from the London cameras. He placed a worn leather notebook on the dark wood. For decades, reporters tried to buy the contents of that book. He always refused. But age changes a man's perspective on history. At 86, the retired brigadier looked at the headlines on his phone. The images showed his ex-wife wearing a crown. He ordered a black coffee and began to talk to an old military colleague. That afternoon, the official story of the 1995 royal divorce started to collapse. The public remembers a simple narrative. They believe a heartbroken Prince Charles fought for the woman he loved, while a bitter husband stepped into the shadows. The reality in the archives tells a different story. Andrew was a high-ranking officer in the Blues and Royals. He understood power, protocol, and command structures. His family had ties to the monarchy going back generations. His parents were close friends with the Queen Mother. He knew the unwritten rules of Windsor before he even met Camilla Shand. He was not a victim of the royal system. He was a piece on the chessboard. In 1970, the social scene in London was small and tight. Andrew met Camilla through mutual friends at a polo match. They shared a love for horses, hunting, and sharp humor. But Andrew was also a man of the world. He had a reputation for attracting the attention of high society women. One of those women was Princess Anne. The young princess and the dashing cavalry officer started a brief, intense relationship. This created an immediate problem for the palace. The Queen Mother watched the situation with growing concern. A Catholic officer marrying the Queen's only daughter was a constitutional impossibility at the time. The palace needed a distraction. They needed to move the pieces. At the exact same time, a young Prince Charles was introduced to Camilla. The connection was instant, but the timing was disastrous. Charles was the heir to the throne. Camilla was viewed by senior courtiers as a woman with a past. In the 1970s, the royal family required a virgin bride for the future king. Lord Mountbatten stepped in with a plan. He arranged for Charles to be assigned to a naval ship for an 8-month deployment. The message was clear. Charles had to leave the country, and Camilla had to be taken off the market. The pressure shifted entirely to Andrew. He received a quiet visit from his own father and Camilla's father, Major Bruce Shand. The two older men had a specific agenda. They wanted a wedding, and they wanted it quickly. They did not wait for Andrew to propose on his own. They took matters into their own hands. The fathers wrote a formal marriage announcement and sent it directly to the Times newspaper. Andrew woke up one morning in 1973 to read about his own engagement in print. He had not signed a contract, but the trap was set. The wedding took place on July 4th, 1973. It was the social event of the year. The Queen Mother attended. Princess Margaret was in the pews. Princess Anne stood there, watching her former lover marry her friend. The cameras captured smiles and beautiful lace, but the tension was thick. Prince Charles was thousands of miles away on a naval vessel. He reportedly wept when he received the news. The palace had achieved its goal. The line of succession was safe, and Camilla was now Mrs. Parker Bowles. For the first few years, the marriage looked functional from the outside. They moved to Bolhide Manor in Wiltshire. They had 2 children, Tom and Laura. Andrew climbed the ranks of the military. He was brilliant at his job. He organized security for major royal events. He was a trusted insider, but inside the manor house, the atmosphere was cold. Andrew continued his lifestyle, often staying at his club in London during the week. Camilla stayed in the country, isolated with the children. The distance grew every month. Then came the 1980s. Prince Charles married Lady Diana Spencer in a massive public spectacle. But the old connection between Charles and Camilla never truly died. By 1986, the secret meetings started again. They used country houses, remote estates, and trusted friends to hide the affair. Andrew knew exactly what was happening. He did not storm into the palace. He did not demand an explanation from the Prince of Wales. As a military man, he chose a different strategy. He chose silence. This silence was not a sign of weakness. It was a calculated trade. Andrew was managing a complex domestic situation while maintaining his career. He enjoyed the status that came with his proximity to the throne. He was a frequent guest at royal hunting parties. He even rode in the sovereign's escort at Ascot. He was living a double life. He was the wronged husband in private, but the ultimate royal insider in public. The palace appreciated his discretion. They rewarded him with promotions and access. But a secret cannot survive forever in the modern media age. The 1992 disaster changed everything. It was the Queen's self-proclaimed horrible year. The marriages of 3 of her children collapsed simultaneously. Then came the ultimate blow to the family's privacy. A leaked audio tape was leaked to the press. It was a private, highly intimate conversation between Charles and Camilla from 1989. The public called it the Camilla-gate tapes. The transcript was printed in every tabloid newspaper in the world. The embarrassment for Andrew was total. He could no longer pretend he didn't know. His military colleagues were reading his wife's intimate words on the train to work. His children were facing intense media scrutiny at school. The quiet arrangement among Andrew, Camilla, and the palace was shattered. The public demanded action. The institution of the monarchy was shaking under the weight of the scandal. A decision had to be made, and it had to come from the top. In January of 1993, Andrew received an invitation to a private meeting in London. The location was not a palace. It was a discreet office belonging to a senior royal legal advisor. There were no cameras. There were no press releases. A single sheet of paper sat on the desk. The document outlines a path forward that would protect the Prince of Wales at all costs. The palace needed Charles to be single again, so he could eventually marry Camilla and stabilize the monarchy's future. But to do that, Andrew had to agree to walk away first. The advisor made the terms clear. If Andrew fought the divorce, the details of his own private life would be leaked to the press. The papers had files on his relationships, his clubs, and his financial dealings. It would destroy his military career and his social standing. But if he agreed to a quiet, uncontested divorce, he would be taken care of. His pension would be protected. His children would retain their social status. He would remain an honored friend of the royal family. He had 24 hours to make his choice. Andrew looked at the document. He knew the power of the institution he served. He signed the paper. The announcement of their separation was issued in 1995. The statement was brief, calling it a private matter. The public assumed Andrew left because he was tired of the affair. They did not know about the document on the legal advisor's desk. They did not know he was pushed out by a system that needed his wife to save a future king. Now, decades later, the old brigadier sits in the Wiltshire pub. He looks at his leather notebook. The secrets inside are no longer just personal memories. They are historical facts. He watched his ex-wife walk down the aisle of Westminster Abbey to be crowned queen. He sat in the congregation, a quiet witness to the final chapter of a 60-year plan. He smiles faintly as he finishes his coffee. The world thinks they know why he walked away. But the true story is written in the pages of a notebook that the palace hoped he would never open. The unwritten rules of the guardroom floor. A heavy silver signet ring caught the dim morning light at the Knightsbridge barracks. Andrew Parker Bowles adjusted his uniform collar in front of a spotted mirror. It was late autumn, 1972. His boots shone like dark glass. As an officer in the Blues and Royals, Andrew spent his days surrounded by history, horses, and heavy discipline. He knew how to follow orders. He also knew how to navigate the social hierarchy of London high society. A captain's salary did not buy a townhouse in Mayfair, but an impeccable pedigree opened every door. His family possessed those keys. The facts of Andrew's ancestry mattered to the palace. His grandmother was a close confidant of the Queen Mother. His father, Derek Parker Bowles, was a racehorse owner who drank gin with Prince Philip. Andrew grew up playing on the lawns of royal estates. He understood that survival in this world required absolute discretion. You did not talk to reporters. You did not complain about bad luck. You kept your head down and your uniform clean. But his personal life was about to collide with state security. The problem started with a red sports car parked outside the barracks. Princess Anne drove herself to meet Andrew for lunch. They were a striking couple. Anne was headstrong, sharp-tongued, and fiercely independent. Andrew was confident, charming, and entirely unfazed by her royal title. They spent weekends riding across the Berkshire Downs. For months, the London gossip columns dropped subtle hints about a royal engagement. But the relationship faced a massive legal wall. Andrew was a Roman Catholic. Under the Act of Settlement of 1701, any member of the royal family who married a Catholic lost their right to the throne. Princess Anne was high in the line of succession. The Queen Mother called a private meeting with her advisors at Clarence House. She looked at a family tree laid out on her desk. The verdict was immediate. The romance had to end before the press forced a public statement. They needed to move Andrew away from the princess. At that exact moment, Camilla Shand entered the equation. She was living in a small flat in Belgravia with a friend. She was 25, funny, and deeply in love with Andrew. They had been dating on and off for years, but Andrew refused to settle down. He enjoyed his freedom too much. Camilla's father, Major Bruce Shand, watched his daughter's unhappiness with growing anger. He decided to act. He contacted Andrew's father to arrange a private meeting at a gentleman's club in St. James's. The two older men drank scotch in leather armchairs. They looked at the calendar. Prince Charles was scheduled to board the HMS Minerva in January 1973 for a long Caribbean deployment. The naval tour was a deliberate palace move to keep Charles away from Camilla. The fathers realized they had a tight window of opportunity. If they did not marry Camilla to Andrew now, Prince Charles might return and create a constitutional crisis. The fathers shook hands on a plan. They bypassed Andrew completely. On a Tuesday morning, Major Shand walked into the offices of the Times newspaper. He handed a clerk a handwritten notice. The announcement stated that an engagement had been agreed between Captain Andrew Parker Bowles and Miss Camilla Shand. The notice appeared in the paper the next morning. Andrew was sitting in the mess hall at Combermere Barracks when a fellow officer shoved the newspaper under his nose. He had never proposed. He had never bought a ring. Andrew picked up the telephone to call Camilla. She was just as surprised as he was, but the public machinery was already moving. Congratulations, telegrams arrived at the barracks by the dozen. Andrew's commanding officer told him the regiment expected a proper military wedding. To back out now would cause a massive public scandal. It would ruin his military career and alienate his family. Andrew realized he had been outmaneuvered by his own father and his future father-in-law. The mystery remains why a proud military officer accepted this forced arrangement so quietly. The answer lay in a private file held by the regiment's senior colonel. Andrew faced significant debts from polo horses and London club life. Major Shand offered a substantial marriage settlement that would clear those debts immediately. In exchange, Andrew had to marry Camilla before the Prince of Wales returned from his naval duties. The contract was financial, social, and military. The wedding took place at the Guards' Chapel in London. Thousands of people lined the streets. The Queen Mother arrived in a black limousine, smiling for the cameras. Princess Anne walked inside alone, wearing a high-collared dress. She sat near the front, watching the man she loved marry her close friend. Prince Charles was on a ship near Gibraltar. He wrote a letter to a friend that night, describing the news as a cruel blow. The palace had won. The pieces were locked in place. The new couple moved into a stone house in Wiltshire called Bolhide Manor. On paper, they were the perfect country family. They had a son named Tom and a daughter named Laura. Andrew spent his weeks in London, managing his military duties and staying at his club. Camilla stayed in the country, managing the stables and the children. The marriage was an agreement, not a romance. They lived separate lives under the same roof. By 1979, the landscape changed again. Prince Charles was 30 years old and under immense pressure to find a wife. He visited Bolhide Manor frequently to hunt and play polo with Andrew. The three of them often sat around the dinner table together. The local villagers saw the prince's red Aston Martin parked in the driveway on weekends. They assumed Charles was visiting his old polo buddy. They did not know what happened after the dinner plates were cleared. Andrew played the part of the accommodating host. He never challenged the prince. He never locked the doors of his home. He understood that his social position, his promotions, and his future depended on his cooperation with the heir to the throne. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel. He received prestigious assignments. The palace rewarded his discretion with concrete status. But a new factor was about to disrupt this delicate balance. In 1981, Charles married Lady Diana Spencer. The world watched a fairy tale wedding at St. Paul's Cathedral. Camilla sat in the congregation wearing a gray suit. Andrew stood nearby in full ceremonial uniform. The young Princess of Wales quickly realized that her marriage included 3 people. The tension inside the royal family began to boil. Diana refused to stay silent like the old aristocracy. She began to fight back. The public soon learned the details of the secret arrangement. By the late 80s, the palace was a battleground of leaked stories and midnight phone calls. Andrew found himself caught between a furious Princess of Wales and an increasingly desperate Prince of Wales. His quiet life in Wiltshire was about to become global news. The unwritten rules of the guardroom floor were no longer enough to protect him from the coming storm. Shadows in the Polo Club lounge. A wooden polo mallet slammed into a white plastic ball, sending it flying across the grass at Windsor Great Park. Andrew Parker Bowles pulled the leather reins of his horse, turning sharply toward the spectator stands. It was July 1985. Prince Charles was sitting in the royal enclosure, talking quietly to Camilla. Princess Diana sat 10 rows away, looking out at the field through dark sunglasses. The public saw a sunny afternoon of aristocratic sport. The people in the front rows saw something else entirely. Andrew rode past the royal box, lifted his cap to the Prince of Wales, and kept moving. The facts of that summer were documented in private diaries across Gloucestershire and Wiltshire. Charles and Camilla had officially restarted their relationship. They used a network of country houses owned by close, loyal friends. One main location was Middlewick House, a beautiful stone property Andrew and Camilla bought in 1985. The house sat near Highgrove House, the prince's own country estate. The drive between the 2 properties took less than 15 minutes along narrow country lanes. The tension inside the Parker Bowles household grew with the proximity of the 2 houses. Visitors noticed that Andrew's presence at Middlewick became rare on weekends when the prince's car arrived. Local staff received clear instructions about which bedrooms to prepare and which entrance gates to unlock. Andrew spent these days at his London flat or visiting friends in the racing community. He did not cause a scene because he was a pragmatist. He knew his military career was directly tied to his silence, but the arrangement required a high level of logistical coordination. In late 1986, Andrew was promoted to colonel. He was also given the role of silver stick in waiting on the Queen. This position meant he was responsible for royal protection during major state events. He now held the keys to the palace offices and had direct access to the royal security files. The ultimate mystery was how an officer could manage royal security while his boss was openly having an affair with his wife. The answer was found in a hidden agreement made at the Cavalry and Guards Club on Piccadilly. Andrew met with a senior private secretary from Buckingham Palace over lunch. The palace needed to ensure Andrew would not file for a scandalous divorce that would legally destroy the prince's chances of ever ascending the throne. The secretary offered a compromise. Andrew's military promotions would be fast-tracked, and he would receive a guaranteed seat on several lucrative corporate boards upon his retirement. In return, the Parker Bowles marriage had to remain legally intact for the foreseeable future. Andrew accepted the terms. He continued to appear at public events alongside Camilla, smiling for the cameras at Royal Ascot and the badminton horse trials. He even accompanied Charles on official hunting trips in Scotland. The British establishment looked at Andrew as the ultimate gentleman who put the crown before his own pride. But the facade began to crack as Princess Diana started her own media campaign. Diana knew about Middlewick House. She knew about the quick drives down the Wiltshire lanes. She refused to accept the old aristocratic rules of quiet acceptance. She began leaking information to trusted journalists about the true nature of her husband's country weekends. The names of Andrew and Camilla started appearing in private intelligence briefings circulated among senior newspaper editors in Fleet Street. By 1989, the situation reached a breaking point. A private security firm intercepted a highly sensitive telephone call. The conversation took place between Charles, who was staying at a friend's house, and Camilla, who was in her bedroom at Middlewick House. The recording was 23 minutes long. The contents were incredibly intimate, far beyond anything the public imagined. The tape did not just expose an affair, it exposed the complete vulnerability of the royal communications network. The tape was not immediately broadcast. A media executive held the copy in a safe in London for months, unsure of the legal consequences of releasing it. Rumors of the recording's existence spread through the upper echelons of the military. Andrew heard the rumors from a fellow officer during a meeting at the Ministry of Defense. He realized that his quiet arrangement with the palace was no longer safe. A single leak could destroy his reputation instantly. He immediately confronted Camilla in the morning room at Middlewick. The argument was short. Andrew did not focus on the infidelity. He focused on the exposure. He told her that the palace could no longer protect them if the tape became public. He packed a leather suitcase and drove back to London that afternoon. He moved out of the main house permanently, choosing to live in a small apartment near the barracks. The separate lives they had lived for years were now a matter of physical reality. The palace scrambled to contain the damage. Courtiers held emergency meetings at Sandringham to discuss the potential fallout. They knew that if Andrew sued for divorce based on adultery with the heir to the throne, the constitutional damage would be permanent. The Church of England did not allow divorced people to marry, and the king was the supreme governor of the church. The entire structure of the monarchy was at risk over a 23-minute tape. Andrew received another visitor at his London club. This time, it was a high-ranking member of the Queen's personal legal team. The lawyer brought a new set of conditions. The old agreement from the mid-80s was no longer sufficient. The public mood was changing, and the tabloids were getting closer to the truth every day. The palace needed to prepare for the worst-case scenario. They needed Andrew to sign a strict non-disclosure agreement before any tape could leak to the press. The document was laid out on a green baize table in a private dining room. It stated that Andrew would never write a memoir, never give interviews about his marriage, and never testify in any future royal legal proceedings. In return, the palace would guarantee the financial independence of his children and ensure his military pension was doubled through a special administrative loophole. Andrew looked at the pen. He knew that signing meant giving up his voice for the rest of his life. He signed the document in December 1990. He believed he had bought himself time and security. But the news cycle moved faster than the palace's legal team. Less than 2 years later, the tape was sold to a foreign newspaper. The world was about to hear every word spoken in the Wiltshire night, and Andrew's signed agreement was about to face its ultimate test. The night the phone lines went cold, a heavy stack of morning newspapers slammed onto the guardroom desk at the Knightsbridge Barracks. It was January 11th, 1993. The headline on the front page of the Daily Mirror was visible from 5 feet away. The full transcript of the intercepted phone call was printed across 4 pages. Andrew Parker Bowles walked past the desk, looked down at the large black text, and kept walking. He went straight to his private office and locked the heavy oak door. His phone was already ringing. It didn't stop ringing for 3 days. The facts of that morning changed the British media landscape forever. The tape was no longer a rumor among Fleet Street editors. It was public property. Anyone with a few pence could buy the transcript and read the highly explicit words exchanged between the Prince of Wales and Andrew's wife. The publication occurred just 1 month after Prime Minister John Major officially announced the separation of Charles and Diana in the House of Commons. The timing was catastrophic for the government and the Crown. The social pressure on Andrew became unbearable within hours. He received a call from his commanding officer before noon. The regiment was concerned about the household cavalry's public image. Andrew was a brigadier now, holding a position of immense institutional respect. He could no longer hide behind military hierarchy. The tabloids parked 20 photographers outside his London apartment building. They followed his staff to the grocery store. The quiet country arrangement was entirely dead. Andrew decided to leave London under the cover of darkness. He drove his Green Rover to a small estate in Hampshire, owned by his brother. He left his mobile phone in a drawer in his apartment to avoid tracking. He needed to speak to Camilla without palace officials listening in. He used a public payphone outside a petrol station on the A303 highway to make the call. When Camilla answered, her voice was shaking. She was trapped inside her Wiltshire home, surrounded by global media. The conversation lasted exactly 4 minutes. Andrew did not offer comfort, nor did he ask for explanations. He stated the facts clearly. The marriage could not survive this level of public ridicule. He told her that he was contacting his lawyers in the morning to prepare formal separation papers. Camilla agreed without an argument. The long-standing social pact between them was broken beyond repair. But the palace machine was already working on a counter-strategy. The mystery was how the palace would handle a divorce that involved the future head of the Church of England. The answer came through a courier who arrived at the Hampshire estate on January 14th. The courier delivered a sealed leather pouch from the Duchy of Cornwall office. Inside was a legal brief drafted by the prince's personal solicitor, Fiona Shackleton. The palace did not want Andrew to file for divorce based on Camilla's adultery. A public court case detailing the affair would legally prevent Charles from ever marrying again under church law. The legal brief proposed a different route. Andrew would file for divorce based on the fact that he and Camilla had lived apart for 2 continuous years. This specific legal clause under English law did not require a statement of fault. It didn't mention infidelity, phone tapes, or the Prince of Wales. It would look like a standard mutual breakdown of a long-term marriage. The document included a strict financial schedule. The Duchy of Cornwall would provide a significant trust fund for Tom and Laura, and Camilla would receive a substantial housing allowance. Andrew studied the financial figures. He knew the money was not a gift. It was a payment for his compliance with the legal strategy. If he refused and went to an open court, he would have to pay his own massive legal fees. He would also risk losing his military pension if the Ministry of Defense decided his private life brought the armed forces into disrepute. The institutional walls were closing in on him. He picked up his pen and wrote a single word at the bottom of the brief: agreed. The legal machinery moved slowly behind closed doors for the next 2 years. Andrew stayed out of the public eye, focusing on his duties with the Royal Army Veterinary Corps. He avoided royal events and spent his weekends at remote racing stables in Ireland. Camilla remained at Middlewick House, living a quiet life under the protection of a special police security detail funded by the prince. The public tension slowly cooled, but the final signatures were still required. On January 11, 1995, exactly 2 years after the tape leaked, the formal announcement was sent to the Press Association. The statement was less than 50 words long. It stated that Brigadier Andrew Parker Bowles and Mrs. Camilla Parker Bowles were divorcing after 21 years of marriage. It added that the decision was entirely amicable and that neither party would make any further comments. The decree nisi was granted in a London court 3 weeks later. The process took less than 10 minutes. The press assumed the story was over. They turned their attention back to Princess Diana and her upcoming television interviews. Andrew felt a sense of relief as the cameras finally left his apartment building. He was a single man, financially secure, and still respected within his military circles. He believed he had successfully navigated the dangerous waters of royal politics. He had followed the rules, signed the papers, and saved the crown from a constitutional disaster. But the final chapter of the arrangement was about to play out in a way Andrew never anticipated. 10 years after the divorce, in 2005, King Charles received official permission to marry Camilla in a civil ceremony at Windsor. Andrew received an official invitation to the wedding. He was asked to sit in a prominent row alongside his children. The palace needed him there to show the world that there was no lingering bitterness. The old soldier had to play his part one more time, standing in the abbey as a ghost from the past. Gold-embroidered invitations rested on the hall table at Andrew's London home in early 23. The royal crest was stamped clearly at the top. The date was May 6, 23. The location was Westminster Abbey. Andrew Parker Bowles adjusted his medals as he walked through the great stone archway of the abbey on that cold spring morning. He was 83 years old. He passed rows of foreign dignitaries and prime ministers. The usher guided him to a prominent seat in the section reserved for close family. He sat just a few rows behind the immediate line of succession. The facts of that day were broadcast to an audience of millions. King Charles III was crowned alongside Queen Camilla. The global audience watched the ancient ritual, the oil, and the heavy gold crown. They saw Camilla's children and grandchildren taking central roles in the ceremony. Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes sat next to their father. Andrew sat quietly throughout the 2-hour service. He watched his ex-wife walk down the long aisle in her white and gold robes. The tension in that specific corner of the abbey was visible to those who knew the history. As the Archbishop of Canterbury placed the crown on Camilla's head, she made brief, direct eye contact with the guest section. Andrew did not lower his eyes. He nodded slightly. It was a silent acknowledgement between two people who shared a 40-year secret. The public saw a harmonious modern family gathering. The palace archives held a very different record of how this moment was achieved. The mystery that remained for decades was why Andrew never broke his silence after the 1995 divorce. Other royal associates wrote books and sold stories to television networks. Andrew stayed completely silent. The reason became clear during a small private gathering held at a London hotel 2 weeks after the coronation. Andrew spoke to a small group of retired cavalry officers. He explained that his silence was never about fear of the palace. It was the final condition of a lifelong military contract. The contract was tied to his final military retirement package in the late 90s. The palace ensured Andrew received a quiet appointment as a director of a major racecourse management group. This position provided a steady, high-level income for decades. More importantly, the palace agreed that his children would always be treated as members of the extended royal family. His son Tom became a godfather to Prince George. His daughter Laura's children were chosen as pages of honor for the coronation. Andrew realized early on that an angry ex-husband would ruin his children's future. If he fought the institution, his family would be completely exiled from British public life. By cooperating, he secured their titles, their wealth, and their social safety. He traded his personal pride for his family's permanent security. The palace got what it needed. They presented Camilla as a respectable woman who was free to marry the king, without the shadow of a bitter first husband contesting the narrative. The old brigadier looked at the final news reports on his television screen back in Wiltshire. The newspapers called Camilla the savior of the modern monarchy. The articles praised her loyalty and her quiet dedication to duty. Andrew smiled as he closed his leather notebook. He knew the true cost of that crown. He knew the legal threats, the secret lunches at the clubs, and the forced engagement notice in 1973. He had played his part perfectly from the guardroom floor to the Abbey pews. He walked out to his garden as the evening sun went down over the hills. He had survived the scandals, the leaked tapes, and the collapse of his public reputation. He was 86 years old now, and the crown was safe. The royal family had moved on, and the secrets were locked away in the palace vaults. Andrew Parker Bowles had finally completed his long service to the British monarchy. He walked back inside his house, locked the front door, and turned off the lights. Andrew Parker Bowles gave up his voice so his family could keep their place in history. Now, his 60-year silence revealed